So, as you're probably aware, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has been receiving quite a few updates as of late, and most of them have been corresponding to the releases of Booster Course Pass waves. We of course got the new tracks and characters that are being added to the game as DLC, but we did also get a few quality of life features added to the game for everybody, including a new item select screen so you can play with custom items. And as you've probably already realized, there are a few missing slots on this item select screen, and not even just an uneven row at the bottom. There are literal squares that you're able to select with your cursor in-game that just have no items in them. And that's led many, including myself, to believe there could be the possibility of us getting more items added to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Now at first you might think this would be absolutely absurd. There's no way Nintendo would change the way the game plays this much. However, in these previous quality of life improvements that I mentioned, Nintendo changed the stats of pretty much every character and kart combination in the game. So at this point, I think pretty much anything is fair game for speculation. As of right now, there are only 2 empty item slots in this item select screen. However, in this video, I'm going to be speculating 15 items that I would want to see added to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. The first 5 items will be returning items from the console Mario Kart games, meaning Mario Karts 1 through 7. The second 5 items, however, will be returning only from Mario Kart Tour, since that game has more items than pretty much the rest of the series combined. And then the third 5 items will be completely brand new items that I've decided to come up with for this video. Keep in mind, as always, that this list is comprised entirely of my opinions, and if you have a different opinion on what items you think should be added to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, make sure to let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to see what you guys think. So with all that out of the way, let's roll the intro and get into 15 items that I want to see added to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Now, the first item that I'd like to talk about returning from console Mario Kart games is one that's been a staple of the franchise ever since Mario Kart 64, and of course that is the fake item box, which for some reason was excluded from Mario Kart 7 and 8. If you're not aware, you're able to place this item on the track similar to a banana, and from a distance it looks quite a lot like a regular item box. However, as you start to get closer to it, it becomes clear that it's actually an obstacle, as it will start to turn red. If you run into this, it'll cause your cart to spin out, and it'll also have some electrical particles that go around your cart. While you can technically trail this item behind you by holding down the item button, it doesn't exactly do much good because it can't actually block any incoming projectiles. I think this should remain the same if it is brought over to Mario Kart 8, however, I do think that if a fake item box is placed on the track, it should be able to block and break items, meaning that if you have very good timing and you place a fake item box right behind you as an item's about to hit you, you can technically block it with the fake item box, which implements a lot of risk versus reward, which I absolutely love to see in Mario Kart. In my opinion, this adds a lot more strategy to the game, as if you're careful with where you place your fake item boxes, or fibs as they've come to be known, you can trap shortcuts and place them just in front of regular item boxes, which means other players will have to be extra aware when driving the track. Not only do I think this item completely deserves to be reintroduced into Mario Kart, but I think it's honestly pretty likely that it will as well, given that it's such an iconic item in the series. But then, moving on to our next item, we have one that first appeared in Mario Kart Wii. We have the Mega Mushroom. As the name once again implies, whoever uses this item will become much larger than all other racers, and will be able to squash them by driving over them, and will be able to go through off-road without slowing down. I would just absolutely love to see this added to the game, and I would say it's pretty likely if there weren't a few problems with it that I will get to in a second. But overall, I don't think there's anything I would really want to change about this item. However, like I just mentioned a few seconds ago, it does have a few problems with how it could be implemented into Mario Kart 8. As you probably know, Mario Kart 8's central gimmick is that it has anti-gravity, and this sometimes will cause 2 sections of the track of a split path to go one on top of the other. That way you can see racers racing on the ceiling above you, which is a really cool effect. However, this poses a problem with regards to the Mega Mushroom because there is not a lot of space in between you and these racers racing above you. So I'm worried that if there was a Mega Mushroom, it might not necessarily reach the racers that are racing above you, but if you and a racer above you had a Mega Mushroom, that could definitely pose a problem gameplay-wise. Now, the most obvious fix would be to just not have the Mega Mushroom be available on any courses where it could be a problem. However, given that every other item is available on every course in the game, I don't think this would be a very likely solution. So I think the best solution for this is a compromise, still having all the other functions of the Mega Mushroom, but not making you as large as it did back in Mario Kart Wii. I feel like a good size for this would be slightly larger than a bullet bill, that way it's still feasible that you could be running over and flattening other racers. If the Mega Mushroom was implemented in the way I've just described, I think it would be super likely to be added to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and I think it would be so much fun to use in the game. But then our third returning item is one that you probably didn't even remember existed, and it comes all the way back from the original Super Mario Kart on the SNES, the Poison Mushroom. And the reason I say you probably didn't even remember this item existed is because you can't actually get it in the game. In Super Mario Kart, this is one of the items that only the computer players are able to use. But even so, I think it would be perfect to be reintroduced into the franchise in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. But you might have noticed when I showed the picture of this item, it doesn't look like the Poison Mushroom as it's shown in modern Mario media. It actually just looks like a normal mushroom with the color palette of a Mega Mushroom. So I feel like if it were to return, it would definitely take its color palette from the modern Poison Mushroom, which is just purple and pink. How this worked in the original Super Mario Kart is that it would be thrown onto the track similar to a banana. However, if you were to run into it, instead of just spinning out, you would also shrink down, similar to what happens if you're hit by a shock. This would have all the same effects as the shock, and I would imagine it would last for around the same amount of time as a first or second place shock, because if you didn't know, the shock will last different amounts of time depending on what place you were in when you got shocked. It could also probably have some purple smoke particles instead of the electrical particles that normally happen when you get hit by the shock. Overall, I think this would work perfectly in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Not only because I think it would just make the races a lot more engaging, but because there wouldn't really be any problems with the item working with the existing game as well. Since the shock would have a very similar effect to what the Poison Mushroom would be doing if it were added, that means that there wouldn't be any problems with this item working with any of the existing tracks. And overall, I just really think that the Poison Mushroom would fit in extremely well with the existing game. Even though the effects of both the Poison Mushroom and the shock are virtually identical, like I mentioned, I feel like the items themselves are different enough from one another to justify them being in the same game, since the shock is virtually entirely unavoidable and you have no idea when it's going to happen, versus the Poison Mushroom you're able to try and skillfully avoid. But then our next item would be a fairly simple one returning from Mario Kart Double Dash, and that would be the giant banana. And there's not really too much to say about this one. I mean, like the name implies, it's a banana that's giant. Now, if you are to run into it, however, it does split into 3 normal-sized bananas, so it has the potential to take out multiple opponents rather than just one. However, if nobody ends up hitting it, then it becomes an obstacle for you on the next lap, which once again adds an element of risk versus reward, which I've already said I absolutely love to see in Mario Kart. But there is the slight problem of, I don't know if this would be able to be trailed behind the player. You see, Mario Kart Double Dash didn't have the option to trail items behind you in order to block projectiles, so there's not really a precedent for whether you should be able to do that with the giant banana if it were to be added to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. My first thought was just an instant no, because this would block pretty much the entire field of view of the player. But then I thought about it, and the giant banana isn't that big. I mean, it's probably going to be a little bit taller than your character, but it definitely won't take up so much of the screen that you won't be able to figure out what's happening in the race. And since the giant banana, when it breaks, splits into 3 smaller bananas, I think this could add a really interesting mechanic. If you're right behind a player and you hit them with an item and it breaks their giant banana if they're trailing it behind them, then you run the risk of having one of those 3 bananas being shot right into you and spinning you out instead. I would absolutely love for this mechanic to be added to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, and it's actually one of the main reasons that this item ended up making it into this video. But then our final item returning from past console Mario Kart games is one that might be a little bit controversial, and that's because it wasn't exactly well loved in the game it originated from. However, there are some changes that I think could be made to it that I think could make it a really good addition to the game. And of course, I'm talking about from Mario Kart Wii, the Thundercloud. Now, it's no secret that the Thundercloud is many people's least favorite item in the entire Mario Kart franchise, getting sometimes even more hate than the coin item. But before I talk about what I think could change in this item to make it better, I first want to talk about what it did right in the first place back in Mario Kart Wii. The functionality of the item was once you got it, it would appear above you and you would get a massive speed boost. However, once somebody bumps into you, then the item goes to them and they get the speed boost. However, after a short period of time, the thundercloud will emit a little beam of lightning, and it will make you smaller, and it'll have the same effects as the shock, meaning that when you're small, you're going to be able to get run over by other racers, and you're going to just be much slower in general. This just adds so much more chaos to the race, as everybody's scrambling to try and get as much of the speed boost as they can, but then also pass the thundercloud away like it's a hot potato before it shocks them. And I think that's a pretty good thing. In my opinion, Mario Kart thrives in chaos. However, there are a few pretty large problems with this item. The first one being, you can get it in first place, and if you're front running and you get this item, there's pretty much nothing you can do to get rid of it before it shocks you other than completely get rid of your lead and pass it to someone else, which is not a guarantee, or you just let it shock you, which then will probably let everyone else catch up to you anyway. And that's the aspect of the item that can make it in some situations just not fun in any way. So the changes that I will be adding to it would be trying to mitigate that. First off, the obvious solution, just don't be able to get it in first place. That would solve the entire problem I just described a few moments ago. However, I think something slightly better than this could be done to make the item extremely good and even more chaotic, while also not having that situation that I described. Since Mario Kart 8 uses distance-based item distribution as compared to the placement-based item distribution from previous entries in the series, what if instead of just not being able to get the item in first place, you could only get this item if you're close to other players? And it could probably show up in pretty much any placement spot, unless you're maybe extremely far behind first, then you would probably just end up getting a bullet bill or an extremely good item like that. This would mean the only time you can get this item is when it can fulfill its greatest purpose, just adding so much chaos to the race. And if it was added in this way, then I would absolutely love it. But then before we move on to the items returning from Mario Kart Tour, I want to quickly talk about an honorable mention I have, which is the feather. Now, the feather is already in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. However, it's restricted to only being able to be used in the game's battle mode, and I think it could work really well in normal races. In the battle mode, the feather basically gives you a jump boost, as if you just went off of a boost ramp, and this allows you to go over players and steal either their coins or balloons, depending on which game mode you're playing in. Not only do I think this height boost would be perfect for making shortcuts over off-road sections, but I think stealing players' coins is a great idea to implement in normal races, and I really hope Nintendo does decide to do this. But with that honorable mention out of the way, let's move on to our first item returning from Mario Kart Tour, which is actually one I've mentioned in a past video, and that is the hammer. I talked about this a while ago in my video about things other than courses that could be coming over to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe from Mario Kart Tour, and I think that this would fit perfectly in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. It does basically what you would think, allowing you to throw multiple hammers rapidly just like a hammer bro that will cause opponents to spin out, very similar to how the Fire Flower works in Mario Kart 8. However, unlike the Fire Flower where the projectiles just bounce along the track, the hammers from the hammer item will allow you to throw them in an arc. Not to mention, you can throw these hammers extremely rapidly. I mean, think of how the Hammer Bro capture works in Super Mario Odyssey and just put that in Mario Kart. That would be absolutely insane, and I'd really love to see it added to the game, even if it might be a little bit too similar to the Fire Flower. Plus, I feel like this would just be a better version of the Fire Flower anyway. With the Fire Flower, all your projectiles will be thrown downwards, meaning they bounce along the track. However, this is not that good whenever you're in a glider section because, well, they throw downwards. They're not going to hit anybody. However, given that the hammers from the hammer item would be thrown in an arc, they can much more easily hit people while they're in a glider section, and that could also let you set back your opponents a decent amount, given that Lakitu would have to pick them up from falling from the glider section and bring them all the way back to the track. Out of all the items that I've included in this video, I feel like this one is probably among the least likely. However, I would absolutely love to see it in the next Mario Kart replacing the Fire Flower, because even though the Fire Flower as a whole is a much more iconic Mario item than the hammer, I just feel like the hammer is just a better item in terms of how it works in Mario Kart. So I really hope that it does end up replacing the Fire Flower. But then our second item coming from Mario Kart Tour is actually multiple items, as I've decided to group 3 items together that I think could work pretty well in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, though they are very similar to one another. So I feel like if they were to come over, only one of them would do so. And those items are the Banana Barrel, the Mushroom Cannon, and the Bomb Cannon. These items, like I mentioned, all work very similar, and their main purpose is to put other items onto the track. Namely, of course, bananas, mushrooms, and bombs. These are also items that I don't think would be super likely to come to a console Mario Kart, but they would be awesome to have in the game nonetheless. The mushroom and the bomb launchers, I would imagine, could only launch 3 of their respective items, given that mushrooms you want to be able to launch onto the track so you can pick up, but you don't want to launch so many onto the track that all your opponents get one as well. And the bombs, if you were to launch too many, that would add probably too much chaos to the track, and it might honestly lag the Switch a little bit because of all the particle effects. Then again, there's no lag if you turn on only blue shells in the custom item settings, so I feel like that might not end up being a problem. For the banana barrel, however, I think it would be so good if you could just rapid fire 10 bananas right behind you and absolutely decimate your opponents. These all would be purely offensive items as well and have no defensive capabilities because you wouldn't be able to trail them behind you because they're in the cannon. But while you might argue that these items are pretty lackluster and have almost a 0% chance of getting into Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, I feel like our next item on this list would be absolutely game-changing, and I feel like it does have a pretty decent chance of being added, and that is the Dash Ring. And in my opinion, this item is one of the most unique in the entire Mario Kart franchise. This allows you to create 3 boost rings and place them wherever you want on the track. However, unlike with just a mushroom, these boost rings can be useful to your opponents as well, which in my opinion would add a lot of strategy to the game and, once again, risk versus reward. Imagine there's a mushroom shortcut, but you're able to throw a boost ring onto it so you can get it without a mushroom, but then everybody behind you is also able to get it until the boost ring disappears. That means that you didn't really get that much ground on any of the people behind you, however, everyone in front of you, you are now a little bit closer to. That's just one of the unique situations that this item could bring to the game. I feel like its aesthetic would probably change a little bit from what it looks like in Mario Kart Tour, as most of the boost rings in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe are a sort of gold, so I feel like the best aesthetic look for these would be how they appear in Singapore Speedway after the first glider section. I really hope more items are created like this in the future, that allow you to take objects that are already in the game and place them wherever you want in whatever track you want. But then our 4th item from Mario Kart Tour is one that doesn't actually do what you would expect it to, at least in its functionality from Mario Kart Tour, and that item is the Super Bell. So unlike its appearances in any of the Mario platforming games, the Super Bell does not actually grant the player the catsuit in its Mario Kart item appearance, but rather it'll actually function as a bell, and it'll ring a few times, causing a shockwave that will flip players over and spin them out. Now you're probably thinking this is just the exact same thing as the Super Horn. It is literally just a shockwave. However, there are a few key differences that I think could make it a good thing for it to be in the same game as the Super Horn. First off, the Super Bell is not able to destroy items. It is solely used for offense and no defense. But secondly, if it were to come to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe or a future console Mario Kart in general, I think it might be able to change its use slightly to make it even better. And this idea I actually got from one of the videos on Switch Stop's channel, so make sure to go check them out after you're done watching this because they have a lot of great content, including this idea that I'm about to mention. And the original video with this idea will be credited in the description below. I just thought this idea was so good that I couldn't pass up the opportunity to spread it to as many people as possible, even though more people are probably going to see their video than mine. So obviously the Super Bell couldn't just give the character the catsuit. Not only would that require Nintendo to make a new model for every single character in the game, but there's already Cat Peach as a playable character in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Similar to how in Bowser's Fury, all the cats will be attracted to you if you have the cat suit on, the Super Bell will call these cats to you and they'll form a sort of shield around you and they'll jump out at other players, making them spin out and possibly even stealing their items and coins, kind of like how the Piranha Plant works. Once again, this concept for how this item would work is not my original idea, I just really wanted to share it with you guys, so make sure to go check out Switch Stop's video linked in the description after you watch this video. But our final item returning from Mario Kart Tour, in my opinion, is a no-brainer, and I will be so surprised if this never ends up making it into a console Mario Kart game, and that item is the Ice Flower. Frankly, I'm really surprised it took this long to get the Ice Flower in a Mario Kart game, because in my opinion, it's one of the most iconic power-ups from the franchise. Obviously, it works pretty similar to the Fire Flower, except its projectiles, instead of just spinning people out, will actually freeze them, similar to what the Freezies did in Mario Kart Double Dash, having you get trapped in a giant block of ice and skidding along the track. However, it's pretty obvious that this would be quite a bit more devastating to be hit by than just one of the Fire Flower projectiles. So I think instead of just being able to spam a bunch of these ice flower projectiles like you can do with the fire flower, I feel like you should be limited to just 3 projectiles that you can hit opponents with. That is, unless it actually is an item that you can only get if you're super far away from first place. And if that's the case, then I feel like even then, the projectiles should probably only be able to be thrown at around the same speed that the fire flower projectiles were able to be thrown at back in Mario Kart 7, as that was a much slower pace than how they work in Mario Kart 8. I also think this item has the potential to have some really cool interactions with other items and projectiles. What if when one of the ice flower projectiles collided with another offensive projectile, instead of just breaking the projectile, it would freeze it on the track, making a sort of wall for all your opponents to have to drive around. After a while, the ice would melt around the object and it would just leave it there lying on the track, and it would become an obstacle for other racers, similar to a banana how it's left on the track. However, it would more likely end up being a shell, as those are the most common projectiles in the game. Imagine as a blue shell is circling around you, you're able to hit it with the ice flower, and it just freezes and ends up being left on the track. And later on in the race, one of your opponents accidentally runs into it and it explodes them. That would be such a cool mechanic to implement, and I would absolutely love to see it added to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. But now let's move on to what's, in my opinion, the best part of the video: the brand new items. And the first one that I thought of is something that I think would be probably a little bit overpowered in pretty much all races, and it's called the subscribe button. And if you click it, then it'll go around the entire track and take everyone's items and give their effects to you. And if you click the notification bell that's right next to it, not only will it have the same power as the super bell, sending a little bit of a shockwave around you, but it'll also notify you whenever I upload more videos, which sounds like a pretty good item to me. But seriously, if you're enjoying the video and you want to see more content like this, then please make sure to subscribe. It helps out the channel a lot, and you guys get notified, like I said, whenever I upload more videos. So now let's get into the actual first one of the new items, which is the turbo nozzle from Super Mario Sunshine. And I feel like this would work kind of like a bit of a cross between a mushroom and a bullet bill. When you use the item, you'd get a massive speed boost as water is just bursting from behind you. However, it won't actually guide you around the track like a bullet bill would, and rather it would be around the same speed as if you're spamming a golden mushroom. But what makes this a little bit like a bullet bill is that if you run into anyone or anything on the track, you will plow right through them and it will cause them to spin out. I feel like this could work really well as a sort of mid-range item in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, given that even though it does give you a massive speed boost for a decent amount of time, it still does not guide you along the track, meaning that you have to be very careful where you use it, otherwise you could get flung off the entire course. And I feel like I don't even have to say it this time, but there's some risk versus reward for you right there. Another quick honorable mention could be the squirt nozzle from Super Mario Sunshine, as that could be used to spray water in front of you and possibly spin out opponents. However, I just feel like the turbo nozzle would work so much better, and I would love to see it added to the game. But next up, we actually have a Mario enemy that I think could work pretty well as a Mario Kart item, and that is the Twister from the 2D Mario series. Originating in Super Mario Maker 2, the Twister is essentially just a little tornado that will send you flying upwards. And there are two ways that I think this could work great as a Mario Kart item, and the first one is as a projectile. When you get the Twister, you're able to throw it along the track in front of you, and if it hits an opponent, then it'll send them flying up into the air, and it might even make them drop a few coins. This will obviously stop them from moving for a little bit, and overall will just allow you to have an opportunity to pass them. But in my opinion, my other idea for the Twister I think would be even cooler. When you get the Twister, you can throw it on the ground in front of you, and if you drive through it, you'll get a little bit of a height boost that you're also able to trick off of and then get a boost from. Not only would this allow you to cut corners and take shortcuts, but you could also use this to dodge other projectiles, as the items would just go right under you as you go up through the Twister. But because of Mario Kart 8's anti-gravity mechanic, both of these different forms of this item could have severe gameplay implications, because if you have a ceiling where racers can drive right above you, imagine if you're in an anti-gravity section and you use the Twister and you get sent to the area above you. Now, this could probably only work if the path above you is a split path from the path that you're driving on at the moment, given that if it wasn't, there's a possibility you could be sent to an entirely different section of the lap, because that's how some of Mario Kart 8's courses are structured with the anti-gravity. Even with the these limitations, however, I think this would be such a cool mechanic to be added to the game, and it could add a lot of strategy to the game as a whole as well. But then our third new item is one that I've actually seen concepts for all over the internet across Nintendo YouTube, and I think it is an absolutely phenomenal idea, which is from Super Mario 3D World, the Double Cherry. The most popular theory about how this item could work is when used, it could spawn a clone of you in the same cart that goes behind you and blocks any items that could otherwise hit you. And it doesn't go away until either A, you press the item button again for it to just poof away, or B, it's hit by an item. Now I feel like this clone should probably look at least somewhat different than the actual driver. That way you don't get confused on who you're actually controlling. I feel like the best way to implement this would be to have the clone on your screen be semi-transparent and on other players' screens to be completely visible. I would imagine as long as the clone is still active, the Double Cherry would take up a spot in your item slots, similar to how if you're holding a shell or a banana behind you, it will take up an item slot until you release it. That being said, I think it would be really cool if there was the slight possibility under extremely rare circumstances for you to get a second Double Cherry clone to spawn behind you. And like I just mentioned, this would be extremely rare because of how the item works in the item slot. This obviously wouldn't be able to work by just getting 2 Double Cherries from a double item box, given that to use your second item slot, you have to first get rid of your first one, and to get rid of the Double Cherry in your first item slot, you have to get rid of your clone. But under this one specific circumstance, I think this could work, and it would be so cool if somehow this item ends up being added to a Mario Kart game in the future, and hopefully Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, if this feature was included. If there's a shock that causes everybody's items to go onto the track, and somebody gets a Double Cherry from an item box, then if they run into the Double Cherry that's already been shocked onto the track, they will end up with 2 Double Cherry clones. I probably put a little bit too much thought into how this item could work, but that's only because I think it would be so cool if it was added to the game. But then our fourth brand new item from this video is actually something that comes from Super Mario Odyssey, and that is the Poison Piranha Plant. Now this would probably act as a combination of quite a few things already in the game. The blooper, the Piranha Plant, the Oil Slick, and ice? It might sound a little bit strange at first, but just let me explain. The Poison Piranha Plant would go in front of your cart just like a normal Piranha Plant would. However, instead of going and biting other players, it'll instead spit poison goop all over the track. This will stay on the track and act very similar to an Oil Slick, causing anybody that goes through it to spin out. Or if it ends up just getting spat right onto a player, they'll spin out just on the spot. But after they spin out, they'll still have the poison goop on their cart, and this will have a very similar effect to the blooper, obstructing the player's vision. But it will also cause their wheels to be slippery, having very similar physics to any ice collision in the game. This effect would probably only last around half the time a blooper does, given that you will have already spun out, and it also affects the way your game plays rather than just your vision. If this was added to the game, I think it would honestly be one of my favorite items, because I love all the aspects of it, and I honestly think it's a better item than both the blooper and the Piranha Plant. So I would not be upset at all if in the next Mario Kart game this were to replace both of them. But then our final brand new item for this video is actually something that's technically already in Mario Kart, but not as an item per se. And that's because our final item for this video is the item box. And at first you're probably thinking, that doesn't make sense at all. I mean, you get items from an item box. Why would you get an item box from an item box? Well, that's because the item box item would essentially just allow you to get an item box at any point in the race. And I just said the word item 7 times in a sentence, and it somehow made sense. Anyway, moving on. This would be a game changer for the entire game. It would add an entire new level of strategy. One of the most strategic elements of Mario Kart already is risking going for a shortcut that doesn't have an item set when you might come out the other side unprotected from oncoming projectiles. Or you might just end up getting passed because even though you took the shortcut, the people that went the route with the item set got speed items. But if you go through that shortcut with the item box item, this mitigates that problem almost entirely, because you're essentially just putting an item set there that only you can use. I would imagine you would only be able to get this if you're a decent ways away from first, but not all the way in the back of the pack. So it's kind of a mid-range item, and I feel like even then, it would be pretty rare to actually get it. Even though I don't really think it's that likely that it could be added, I would absolutely love to see this added to either Mario Kart 8 Deluxe or just a future Mario Kart game. But what do you all think? Do you think the item box item has a 0% chance of getting added to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe because the subscribe button is going to take its spot? Make sure to let me know down in the comments below. And speaking of that subscribe button, if you liked the video, then why don't you press the like button and the subscribe button? I mean, if you got this far in the video, you probably did like it. And if you want to get notified whenever I upload more videos like this, make sure to press the notification bell as well. Now, with all that out of the way, thank you all for watching. I'm Jacob with the Game Block, signing off.